All right. Awesome. Thanks for setting us up there, Summer. So we last week we wrapped up the forward to the second edition, and we're going to get into the forward to the third edition. But before we do, I left a bit of a cliffhanger coming out of last week. In that last paragraph on Roman numeral XXI, Roman numeral 21, there was this statement, and I'm going to read it again. In all probability, we shall never be able to touch more than a fair fraction of the alcohol problem in all its ramifications. And I made the maybe controversial statement one of the few times I disagree with something in the big book. And I asked you, everyone who was here, to think about what could be the impact of each of us sponsoring 3 people correctly, taking them through the steps. Just 3 people over the course of their recovery. And I know there's some people here. Bert's coming up in 33 years. He's probably taken tons of people through the steps. I know David's got 1 million sponsees. I sponsor a bunch of people. Heather sponsors a lot of people here. I know Sam, sure Howard and Kathy, etc. So we've all probably done way more than 3. But what if, the question is, what if just 3 people I got through the steps correctly, and they had a spiritual awakening, and then they kept living that life? So let's see what that starts to look like. All right, I'm going to see if I can do this effectively. All right, you guys see my little PowerPoint here? I'm not a graphic designer, okay? But so this is me, stick figure David, and 3 of my stick figure sponsees. So Heather, Jamie, and Daniel, for example, okay? So then what happens when the 3 of them take 3 people through the steps correctly and they have a spiritual awakening? Well, it starts to look like that. And then what happens when those 9 people, which are just only 3 guys, each just taking 3. But what happens when each of those 9 people up top take 3 people each through the steps? Starts to get real busy in a hurry. I don't ever claim anything original. Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't need my original take in anything. I was just listening to somebody talking one day about how great it was that we had 2 million people in Alcoholics Anonymous worldwide. And I was like, I don't know that that's that great. I think there's way more than 2 million people that need our help. In all probability, we should never be able to touch more than a fair fraction of the alcohol problem and all its ramifications. 2 million is just a fair fraction. But what happens if all these people then carry the message to 3 more? So I started thinking about, guys, if you remember this is going to hurt everybody's head. You remember exponents? So like 3 to the 3rd power is 3 times 3 times 3, which is 9. So I started playing around with the numbers, and I came up with 3 to the 15th power. And this is when it really starts getting busy. So you do 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. We're all just sponsoring 3 people correctly through the steps. We're each having a spiritual awakening and carrying the message. 3 to the 15th power starts with 1 alcoholic who takes 3 more through the steps properly, and they take 3, and so on 15 times down the line. And here's the math. 1 becomes 3 becomes 9. And by the time you get down 15 generations, it's 14,348,907 alcoholics who have had a spiritual awakening, who have recovered from the hopeless state of mind and body. Starting from me, not starting from this group here, starting from me, okay? And not that I'm doing anything special. I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. And then what do we got? I don't know, close to 40 people here. What if I take the 14,348,907 and multiply that by 40? 573,956,280 people. Don't tell me we can't help more than a fair fraction. If you don't believe me, go do the math after the call. And when I was first playing around with these numbers, I was going to do 3 to the 12th power because it's the 3 legacies and there's 12 of each, and I was trying to be cute. But because I'm an alcoholic, I'm an addict, and I want more, the number wasn't big enough. So I had to go 3 to the 15th power. And by the way, it doesn't have to take us a long time to get to this either. David will tell you, one of his sponsees, Ryan, is here with us tonight. He's 40 some odd days in. He's in his 9th step amends. We move swiftly. That means Ryan's going to be in a position soon to start carrying one of his 3 people, taking them through the steps. Guys, in a matter of years, this group of people just in this meeting tonight could touch almost 600 million people. There's 8 billion people on the planet. Let's say 10% of them are alcoholics, addicts. Guys, we can touch them all. All we got to do is carry the message correctly, work this program thoroughly and honestly.
Good job, bro. So you want to keep that graphic up? You want to take it down?
Well, just for a sec, if you were going to.
Okay, keep it up. So again, David's not saying that we're in the result business. We're not in the result business, but this is hopeful to me. This motivates me to study the big book as it was intended to do. This is a textbook meant to be read and studied. And I need to study with someone that has some basic knowledge of the book, armed with the facts about themselves out of this 12 steps of recovery, so that I can recover too. Yes, I've been sponsoring people since I was 3 months sober. And that's what I'm trying to do with all my sponsees, to get them prepared to sponsor other people out of this book, Alcoholics Anonymous. We're going to get into later on as we get into these forwards here. Are there other ways to get sober? Absolutely, there probably is. I have no doubt in my mind. But there's only one way to get sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. And there's only one result. As a direct result of these steps, we have a spiritual awakening. So we can do this. It motivates me all the time to be a yes person. Yeah, I sponsor double-digit people. I sponsor people all over the United States. I get to do that. I get to sponsor. I think sponsorship, and I'll shut up after this, is probably one of the greatest gifts I've ever been given.
Don't ever say we can't handle this, guys. We got all the resources we need. Okay, that's the first soapbox of the evening, and I'll be bringing that up a lot over the course of the next 3 years when we slowly trudge through the book. But now we're back into the book. Roman numeral 22, it's XXII, which was the forward to the 3rd edition. And I think David and I are going to move pretty swiftly through these because we're dying to get into the doctor's opinion. It's just our favorite chapter in the whole book. So here we go, forward to 3rd edition, XXII. By March 1976, when this edition went to the printer, the total worldwide membership of Alcoholics Anonymous was conservatively estimated at more than 1 million, with almost 28,000 groups meeting in over 90 countries. Surveys of groups in the United States and Canada indicate that AA is reaching out not only to more and more people, but to a wider and wider range. Women now make up more than 1/4 of the membership. Among newer members, the proportion is nearly 1/3. 7% of the AA surveyed are less than 30 years of age, among them many in their teens. Nothing? Okay. The basic principles of the AA program, it appears, hold good for individuals with many different lifestyles, just as the program has brought recovery to those of many different nationalities. The 12 steps that summarize the program may be called, I'm going to do my best accents here, Los 12 Pasos in one country, Les 12 Étapes in another. But they trace exactly the same path to recovery that was blazed by the earliest members of Alcoholics Anonymous.
So this book can serve us all, right? And I know they didn't mention religion here, and Bill got some of the steps from the Oxford group, which was evangelical Christian-based program. But Hindu, Buddhist, Judaism doesn't matter. They wanted to be Christ-like in the Oxford group. We carry this message out of this book the same exact way, and they recover too. Everyone across this whole wide world. See the spiritual nature of this thing? It's just absolutely amazing how it can touch all of our lives. And it goes right back to David's point here. We can sponsor people and get them through the text here, and get them through the steps and get them to God. They can solve their problem. And then the result is that they have a spiritual awakening. They're not asleep dreaming they're awake any longer. What a gift that is. And watch them put their lives back together and have personal relationships with human beings. But the last thing I'll say about that is all my relationships are based upon my relationship with a higher power.
And it's just that just echoes back to what we read on Roman numeral 20 that actually Kathy had brought up at the end of the meeting last week. Alcohol being no respecter of persons, right? And then it goes on to talk about the same democratic evening up process. So alcoholism, drug addiction, whatever our problem is, it respects us not at all. It doesn't distinguish black, white, young, old, rich, poor, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist. Alcohol just doesn't care. The beautiful thing is our program recovery doesn't matter either. There is no point for prejudice here. We all get sick. We all get healthy the same way. In spite of the great increase in the size and the span of the fellowship, at its core remains simple and personal. Simple and personal. Each day, somewhere in the world, recovery begins when one alcoholic talks with another alcoholic, sharing experience, strength, and hope.
So there is one way to recover, and it's through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And again, what I said earlier, if you can find a different way to do it, I just ran out of options. I didn't try everything, but I just ran out of options. And I came to the place where I understand what we're going to get into here in the doctor's opinion when it was explained to me, that what I did was I conceded to my innermost self, what Bill talks about on page 30. Because a lot of times in Alcoholics Anonymous, I hear the word powerless so often that it gets a little bit watered down. But boy, when you look at page 30, you see the word conceded to your innermost self. That is the same as a analogy, a metaphor for powerlessness. And I identify with that. And I've conceded to my innermost self on a daily basis for a lot of 24 hours that I'm a real alcoholic. I'm a desperate alcoholic who desperately needs power in his life. And today I have access to that power as long as I do this work here and stay in the disciplines of 10, 11, 12.
All right, forward to the fourth edition. Roman numeral 23, XXIII. This fourth edition of Alcoholics Anonymous came off press in November 2001 at the start of a new millennium. Since the third edition was published in 1976, worldwide membership of AA has just about doubled to an estimated 2 million or more, with nearly 100,800 groups meeting in approximately 150 countries around the world.
So consider this, and I don't know, so I've been around long enough to had, and Bert is too, and Howard and all these, a lot of people on here. You got surveys at your home group, and you filled them out with your sobriety time, your home group name, and all that stuff, and it goes to GSO, and they figure out how many people, that's how they figure out how many people are sober worldwide. But just think about what happened during the pandemic with this Zoom as we are presently on. I don't know how many Zoom groups are registered with GSO so we can have that survey come directly to us so we all can do that survey. But my estimate is really is uneducational by all means. But I bet you we double our amount of people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, I go on so many literature-based meetings, I'm blown away by the strength in Alcoholics Anonymous today. So as bad as the pandemic was for us, the gift was in return, if I see the positivity in it all, is I've met some of the most finest people in the whole entire world. And I don't know if we'll all be counted or not, but I'm counting on you to help me, and you're counting on me to help you. Never have to do this alone, simply because of what the first step says. The first word in the first step's we. I walked in alone, and I walked out as a we. I never, ever have to be alone again. I do have choice when it comes to that.
All I'm going to add to that is estimated 2 million, and maybe David's right, maybe there's 4 million of us now. That's a far cry from the almost 600 million by my math that this group alone here tonight can help. Literature has played a major role in AA's growth. And a striking phenomenon of the past quarter century has been the explosion of translations of our basic literature into many languages and dialects. In country after country where the AA seed was planted, it has taken root, slowly at first, then growing by leaps and bounds when literature has become available. Currently, Alcoholics Anonymous has been translated into 43 languages. How amazing is that, guys? As the message of recovery has reached larger numbers of people, it has also touched the lives of a vastly greater variety of suffering alcoholics. When the phrase, "we are people who normally would not mix," page 17 of this book, was written in 1939, it referred to a fellowship composed largely of men and a few women with quite similar social, ethnic, and economic backgrounds. Like so much of AA's basic text, those words have proved to be far more visionary than the founding members could ever have imagined. The stories added to this edition represent a membership whose characteristics of age, gender, race, and culture have widened and have deepened to encompass virtually everyone the first 100 members could have hoped to reach.
So as we mentioned earlier on, yeah, the stories in the back have changed. I mean, I've read most of the stories, not all of them in all the editions, but they changed just so we can be more current and be able to really have more relatability. Because I'm looking for, like when I read Bill's story, did I think like Bill, drink like Bill, or feel like Bill? I do the same thing when I go to an open speaker meeting. And by the way, I'm speaking live Sunday at 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock
everybody
here.
fly into Chicago.
So all my sponsees, too, you better be there. Gosh darn it. But anyways, so how about this? More visionaries than the founding members could ever imagine. Do you think if they came back now and seen what we're doing here on Zoom, and yeah, all this literature-based stuff, we have so much literature that's approved by GSO that we're taking advantage of it. David and I and a bunch of his sponsees get together and we're studying the traditions right now. I've been sober for a few 24 hours, and I tell you what, I've tried it. I can't do it alone, just like the steps. I didn't do that alone very well either until I got someone that was armed with the facts about themselves, about the steps as far as the big book goes, and the traditions as far as that goes. So today I'm learning about the traditions, because what I'm going to do with my sponsees, because it's been directed to me, is take them through the steps and then immediately start them into traditions. And then we'll go back and do the steps again, or go through the text a little bit better.
While our literature has preserved the integrity of the AA message, sweeping changes in society as a whole are reflected in new customs and practices within the fellowship. Taking advantage of technological advances, for example, AA members with computers can participate in meetings online, sharing with fellow alcoholics across the country or around the world. In any meeting anywhere, AA share experience, strength, and hope with each other in order to stay sober and help other alcoholics. Modem to modem or face to face, AA speak the language of the heart in all its power and simplicity. Now, this was written pre-pandemic, and I had gone on a completely text-driven AA meeting one time. There was some website, or maybe it was even listed on AA.org, I can't remember, where you could get on online meetings. This was, I don't know, probably 6 or 8 years ago. And the speaker typed and typed and typed, and then you would put an exclamation mark, was like raising your hand, and then you would type your comment. And I was like, all right, this is for super introverted people, not for me, but it was cool to see, whatever works. And probably there were a handful of Zoom meetings, right? But again, when this forward to the 4th edition was written in 2001, they couldn't have seen what was going to happen, because who could have predicted the pandemic? But just like everything else we've experienced out of this very difficult time, we got this amazing blessing, right? And now here we are all together with people from Sweden and the UK and Thailand and US and Canada, and I'm probably missing some other countries, and we're all here getting healthy together in the same way. It's beautiful.
I could be wrong, and most of the time I am. I've been married for a long, long time. It's brought to my attention quite often. But I think with this fourth Forward to the fourth edition is telling me that the fellowship has changed, but the message hasn't changed, right? And all these 24 hours, let's never change that message, please. I have grandchildren today. God bless. I hope they never have to come to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. But if they did, I don't want this message to ever change. Why? Because there's never been any failure in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not a crapshoot. One brief story. When I was in treatment a long time ago, and those crotchety old AA guys come in and said, 9 out of 10 of you guys are going to relapse. Well, that does not have to be true. That does not have to be true. If armed with the proper information, facts about myself, if I carry that message, if I qualify that person, and I take them through this work, step by step, because each step is linked together to get them to a power greater than themselves, to solve their problem, then they can be successful too, just the same way as I am. Same way as that crotchety old guy who never practiced any of those principles in all of his affairs. So I say today that the fellowship has changed a lot. Since I've been around, it has. Mm-hmm. But I see on Zoom, by more than anything else, there are so many great literature-based meetings. I go to Howard and Kathy's on Sunday at 4 o'clock. It's an amazing big book study. Dude, David and I have been doing this big book study for a long time. 3 things I need to always be. I want to be a student, so I continue to learn. That's why I'm going to be on Howard's thing, 4 o'clock Central Time, 5 o'clock Eastern, his time. But then I want to be a practitioner, try to practice these principles in all my affairs. And then I get to be a teacher, to teach this to other people so that they can teach it to other people. Then David's math, which is true, math doesn't lie, but it can be true for all of us, that we can make a difference. As AA has made a difference in my life and everybody I come in contact with today. What a blessing. What an absolute blessing.
All right. The doctor's opinion. Let's do this. Next page, guys. Roman numeral 25, which is XXV. And we're gonna start a little bit here, and then I know after the first paragraph we're gonna just pause, and David's got a little bit more sort of background information he's gonna share with us. So this chapter, the doctor's opinion, just to set it up, and I'm sure David will talk more about this, but it was authored by a guy named William Duncan Silkworth. We of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the reader will be interested in the medical estimate of the plan of recovery described in this book. Convincing testimony must surely come from medical men who have had experience with the sufferings of our members and have witnessed our returns to health. A well-known doctor, chief physician at a nationally prominent hospital specializing in alcoholic and drug addiction, gave Alcoholics Anonymous this letter.
So let's break down that paragraph a little bit. First, anytime we see the word we know that they're talking about the first 100 and their experience. And the plan of recovery described in this book are 12 steps. And then Bill uses words like must, have tos, and had tos 96 times in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then other references that even build upon that even more so, that they are the same as the must. But then it says, well-known doctor, so as David pointed out, Dr. William Duncan Silkworth at a nationally prominent hospital, which we're talking about is Towns Hospital, and later on at Knickerbocker Hospital in New York. So I'm going to give I got this from silkworth.net. That's a really good resource for me anyways. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. I just highlighted some stuff that I find very interesting. So Dr. William D. Silkworth, called the little doctor who loved drunks, began an indispensable contribution to Alcoholics Anonymous during the early 1930s from his position as a medical director of Charles B. Towns Hospital at 293 Central Park West, New York, New York. The hospital was founded in 1901, was well known as both mental and physical components. Silkworth is quoted widely as calling the illness a combination of an obsession of the mind that condemns one to drink and an allergy of the body that condemns one to die or go mad if one continues to ingest alcohol. Silkworth thus disagreed with his employer, Charles B. Towns, who had once claimed to have a cure for alcoholism, believed firmly in a psychological medical model of addiction. but he denied that alcoholism per se was a disease. Silkworth argued that certain individuals were constitutionally susceptible to this is a tough word for me, SENSITIZATION by alcohol, and that alcohol sparked an allergic reaction. This, he insisted, made it physically impossible for an alcoholic ever to tolerate alcohol. Moreover, he said that problem drinkers would have to learn and accept this fact as part of their treatment. Silkworth played a major role in many of the early recoveries from active alcoholism, particularly those in New York. It's estimated that he treated, wait for it, 40,000 alcoholics during his career. The introduction to his writings in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous says early AA members considered the Brooklyn-born Silkworth no less than a medical saint. Dr. Silkworth advised Bill Wilson to stop preaching at the drunks. We'll learn about this a little bit more as we get into Bill's story, as he was trying to help by telling them about his powerful spiritual experience. Silkworth urged Wilson to begin instead by telling each of the alcoholics that his condition was hopeless, a matter of life or death. Only then, Silkworth believed, would the drunks be willing to listen to a story about a spiritual remedy. The book Pass It On page 101 reports Silkworth became a specialist in neurology, a domain that sometimes overlaps psychiatry, and entered private practice in the 1920s. It says Silkworth invested his savings in a stock subscription for a new private hospital. Pass It On, the book, says Silkworth's investment came with the promise of a staff position when the hospital was built. But the report says Silkworth lost everything in the stock market collapse in 1929. And Pass It On quotes Bill Wilson as saying that Silkworth, in desperation, went to towns in 1930 for compensation of about $40 a week plus board. The book Not God on page 22 reports that after he received his medical degree from NYU, Silkworth began a coveted internship during 1900 at Bellevue Hospital in Manhattan. It says that in 1924, after completing specialty training as a neuropsychiatrist, Silkworth became medical director of Towns. Not God, the book, notes that Dr. Silkworth estimated his patient rate of recovery until Bill Wilson came along at approximately 2% success rate. As noted previously, the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous reports that early members considered Dr. Silkworth a medical saint. It was never a secret that his personal relationship with Alcoholics Anonymous was both deep and emotional. He was called the little doctor who loved drunks because he generally cared for and experienced communion with alcoholics, and they loved him. And a deep explanation can be found in the Language of the Art on page 176. In an article he wrote years later for the Grapevine, Bill Wilson noted that Dr. Silkworth treated some 40,000 alcoholics during his career. Wilson added, he never tired of drunks and their problems. A frail man, he never complained of fatigue. During most of his career, he made only a bare living. He never sought distinction. His work was his reward. In his last years, he ignored a heart condition and died on the job among us drunks with his boots on. All but one of the AA historians who influenced his writing believe that Dr. Silkworth held positions at both Towns and Knickerbocker Hospital at the time of his death. But it should be noted that the respected AA historian and author Mel B., who wrote much of Pass It On, the official AA biography of Bill Wilson, mentions only Silkworth's affiliation with the Knickerbocker Hospital at the time of Doctor's death. Dr. Silkworth's death was announced to the fellowship in April of 1951, the version of the AA Grapevine. And the article indicates AAs of that time considered Silkworth more than a medical saint. To those AAs who knew him, William Duncan Silkworth was a hero. In 1951, Grapevine article notes, he freely risked his professional reputation to champion an unprecedented spiritual answer to the medical enigma and the human tragedy of alcoholism. Historians point out that he might have been laughed out of the American Medical Association for holding such a view. Obviously, that did not happen. And lastly, the Wilson article, written especially for the Grapevine, concludes with two questions. Who of us in AA can match his record of Dr. Silkworth? And who has his measure of fortitude, faith, and dedication? That's it.
Dr. Silkworth, as Rob just shared with us in the chat, 5'6", so truly the little doctor who loved drunks, right? Little in stature, but huge in his impact on all of us. As we're
resemble
really
that remark. I resemble that remark, except for I'm not a doctor.
and we're going to see in this story, and we mentioned just in passing, in previous weeks, Dr. Silkworth is really credited with being the first medical person who figured out that this is an illness, not an alcoholic himself. And he contributed so much because he brought this knowledge to Bill Wilson. Sam, you disappear. Where are you at? There you are. Go ahead.
Hi, guys. So I thought it was important to point out the definition of opinion in the doctor's opinion. It is a belief stronger than an impression, but not based on positive knowledge.
Doctor's opinion. And when this was first written, first edition, because it was an opinion, and it was a pretty radical opinion, Dr. Silkworth's name did not appear at the end of the doctor's opinion. Later in printings, when Alcoholics Anonymous was blowing up, and this book was blowing up, he became willing, of course, to put his name in there. So we're continuing on Roman numeral 25 with the letter. To whom it may concern, I have specialized in the treatment of alcoholism for many years. In late 1934, I attended a patient who, though he had been a competent businessman of good earning capacity, was an alcoholic of a type I'd come to regard as hopeless.
So there we are in 1934. I attended to a patient. We know that is Bill Wilson, who, though he had been a competent businessman, stock speculator, of good earning capacity, made a good living. We'll read Bill's story as he builds it up and tears it down, builds it up, tears it down. I relate. Was an alcoholic of a type I had come to regard as hopeless. This is a key condition of alcoholism, is hopeless. When we get into Bill's story, and I'm trying not to go forward in the book because I want to stay current right where we're at right now. But hopelessness and being the hopeless variety is such a key, and I pray if you're new that you feel that hopelessness so that you be willing to go to any lengths, that there's not even a glimmer of one more option that you could try. So that alcoholic type had come to regard as hopeless. This is a doctor who's saying this.
You know what, Sam? We did this in a previous week, but maybe get prepared to give us alcoholism again, right? Because we're back in the doctor's opinion, and he's talking about specializing in the treatment of alcoholism. In the course of his third treatment, so his, being Bill Wilson, this is the patient he attended to. In the course of Bill Wilson's third treatment, Bill, acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. As part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conceptions to other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do likewise with still others. This has become the basis of a rapidly growing fellowship of these men and their families. This man and over 100 others appear to have recovered.
So that first sentence there says, in the course of his third treatment, as David just pointed out, this is Bill in his third course, try to stay sober on knowledge, try to stay sober on fair, know those things work. He acquires certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. Where did he get those ideas from? His childhood friend, Ebby Thatcher. Wonderful, this guy. Few months sober. Hear me loud and clear, guys. Few months sober to carry this message to the alcoholic who still suffers. And as a part of rehabilitation, he's commenced to present his conception of other alcoholics. So this is a direction for me more than a suggestion, that if I'm going to stay sober, I must carry this message to others out of this book. And then at the bottom of that paragraph, it says, this man and over 100 others appear to have recovered. They used the word recovered there. I think if they wanted to use the word recovery, they would have. They wanted to use the word recover because they had recovered from a seemingly a hopeless state of mind and body.
And what is noted specifically here about the plan, the possible means of recovery, carrying the message alcoholic to alcoholic? We know that the plan was working the steps, and we know how the program evolved from here. But what was his experience at the beginning? And as we'll see this more as we get into Bill's story, Bill stayed sober by going out trying to help other people. So what the doctor observed from this hopeless drunk that he had treated many times, that each time he left swearing off forever, that he understood his condition, and he understood what was wrong with him, and he understood he wasn't going to drink again, and he always went and drank again until he got this message from Ebby, as David was talking about. And then he went and tried it himself. And it worked. So it ends with this man and over 100 others appear to have recovered. Remember, there was around, they said, more than 100, somewhere between 77 and 101, as we've been saying every week. We don't know the exact number, right? It's not documented. And then we just finished reading, in 2001, estimated conservatively. It means they think they were low, 2 million members. So we started with Bill and Bob, right, in June of 1935. And then we'll call it 100 by the time this letter was written, 1939, or Rob's got the exact date, July 27, 1938, because the book was published in 39. Thank you for that, Rob. Great reference. So roughly 2 million, some 80-ish years later, not quite, 60-ish, doing my math right. Coming back to what I started off with, guys. Was that enough growth? We only went from 1 million in 1976 to 2 million in 2001. We short by a few million? I think we are. I'm going to keep challenging you guys. 3 to the 15th power.
I wanted to reiterate alcoholism real quick. It's a diseased condition caused by excessive use of alcoholic liquors.
And is that from 1938?
Yeah.
Diseased, discomfort, right? I'm gonna drink. If I can't replace that dis-ease and that discomfort, which is the unmanageability, which is the second half of the first step. 2 separate thoughts in the first step.
I personally know scores of cases who were of the type with whom other methods had failed completely. These facts appear to be of extreme medical importance because of the extraordinary possibilities of rapid growth inherent in this group. They may mark a new epoch in the annals of alcoholism. These men may well have a remedy for thousands of such situations. You may rely absolutely on anything they say about themselves. Very truly yours, William D. Silkworth, MD, right, medical doctor.
I have the definition, couple definitions in here.
Please.
I have scores. I personally know scores. It's just a large number of cases who were of the type with whom other methods had failed completely. And then going on to the next page, I have epoch and annals. So epoch is just a new beginning and annals is history. So I'm going to read that in a sentence. These facts appear to be of extreme medical importance. Because of the extraordinary possibilities of rapid growth inherent in this group, they may mark a new beginning in the history of alcoholism.
Awesome.
So the only thing I got there is the bottom of that paragraph on On 24, Roman numeral 24, it says, these men may well have a remedy. So remedy is for someone who's sick. So doctors pointed out that we're sick, bodily, physically, spiritually. And for thousands, so we could switch that number around to millions today, of such situations, you may rely absolutely on anything they say about themselves. So if that's my experience, you can't really argue with it. I mean, I've had a spiritual awakening. My personality has changed. It's sufficient to recover from alcoholism. I don't suffer from the bedevilments on page 52. Not today. I have that day reprieve contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. That's why it's so important to be so involved in all three sides of the triangle.
And David said Roman numeral 24. So he's got a third edition study guide.
Oh, sorry.
So it's all right. If you're in a fourth edition, it's Roman numeral 26 is where we're at. But I know some other people have the third edition or those studies that are still based on that. Carrying on. The physician who, at our request, gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe. There's that M word again. That the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. It did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life, that we were in full flight from reality, or were outright mental defectives. These things were true to some extent, in fact, to a considerable extent with some of us. But we are sure that our bodies were sickened as well. In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out the physical factor is incomplete. So, we got into this a little bit, sneak preview in previous weeks, and David rattled off how the book is apportioned out, and there's some new people here, so you may want to repeat that too, David, if you don't mind, sort of study of the body and the mind, et cetera. What we're going to be learning over the course of this book that really gets introduced here in the doctor's opinion is that, and Sam gave us a dictionary definition of alcoholism. And I'm sure that was closer to what Dr. Silkworth's definition of alcoholism was from a medical perspective. We're going to learn as we study this book, Alcoholics Anonymous, what AA's view on what alcoholism is and what the real alcoholic, and I'm not saying that in any sort of judgment perspective, the term real alcoholic is used in this book. And what the real alcoholic is defined as in this book is someone who is physically ill, mentally ill, and spiritually ill. Okay, and not just in a general sense. What we're going to be learning here from the doctor is that the physical illness that we have, he's taking great pains. It's being great pains to be described in this chapter. The body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. He's referring to our allergic reaction to alcohol, in that we break out in craving. He's referring to the fact that we're also mentally ill, and again, not in a broad spectrum of mental illness, but that we have a very particular compulsion, obsession, that in the face of injurious behavior from our drinking, when we put down the drink, we pick it up again. And then the third way in which we're, very specifically ill is we have a spiritual malady. We're spiritually ill. We live in the bedevilment, so we'll be studying way down on down the road. But the last sentence here is so important. In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. Because if we didn't break out in craving, even if we were always picking that next drink up, we wouldn't have the experience that I'm sure many of you have had, where we set out to have a beer, we set out to have 2 beers, but we didn't have 2 beers, we had 22 beers, right? And we were pounding our fist on the bar top saying, how did this happen? And whatever kind of coherence we were at after 22 beers anyway. David?
The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, David and I are going to do this quite often. We're going to take statements and we're going to turn them into questions. The reason why we do that is learn from Mark Houston, mainly, at least in my experience, is to personalize this thing. Because when I read a lot of this stuff, as Mark Houston says, it's true for me too. I think they're talking about you. They're not talking about me. So if I personalize this middle of the paragraph, it says, in this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe, that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. David, do you feel your body is quite as abnormal as your mind? There's a reason why we asked that question, and then the last sentence that David talks about. And then a little later on in that paragraph it says, but we are sure that the bodies were sickened as well. David, do you believe your body is sickened as well? Well, then the next sentence is, in our belief, any picture of an alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. And I come into the rooms in 1992 for my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't think anyone explained that to me, or I wasn't paying attention, so I'm not going to blame the group.
Could be
for a long, long time. Could be either one. But in 1999, something happened where I conceded to my innermost self when someone armed with the facts of the book of Alcoholics Anonymous qualified me. This is what I'm supposed to do in the newcomer. I asked him. Howard does this thing, and there's 8 questions that he uses. I stole that from him. I won't go through them all today. But one of the things is I got to ask the new guy, is it okay if I qualify you? And he'll go, what are you talking about? Well, I need to know. Let's find out if you really belong here or not. And then I do the qualification. There's many things in the big book of alcohol. And 2 pages from now, Dr. Silkworth is going to explain to us what that craving looks like in great detail. And we're going to take a long time going through that process as we do at treatment centers, because we want to hammer that home. So I have a great understanding with no question in my mind that once I drink, as David pointed out, and I set out to have 2, I did not change my mind. I did not change my mind. I had 22, and I'm wondering how did this happen again? And then without my permission, without my consent, I picked up that first drink, and I really needed that 22nd one more than I needed the 21st.
And we're trying to stay committed to not jumping ahead in the book. We're going to jump back a lot, but not jump too far ahead, but just only because David mentioned this, and it'll be eons before we get there. He mentioned there's ways to find qualifying statements in the book. So if you want to make a note, first paragraph on page 44, we agnostics, we don't have to turn there, guys. Just make yourself a little note, and at the conclusion of the meeting, go look up first paragraph, page 44. It's going to ask a couple questions to self-determine, to self-diagnose if you might be an alcoholic. Sam, did you have any other words on that one? Were we good?
I did. I had maladjusted.
Please.
Maladjusted is unhappy or unsuccessful because of failure to suit one's own desires or needs to one's life condition in life. So it did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were unhappy and unsuccessful because of our failure to suit our own needs and desires to our life, that we were in full flight from reality or were outright mental defectives.
Does everybody understand what this sentence is saying too? It's taking great pains to say, as we were getting educated about our condition, especially, that there was more going on, that we weren't just satisfied when someone said, okay, David, can you control your drinking? I'd say no. What they're saying is, if what was told me was, dude, you have no basis of reality. There's something wrong with your brain, and that's why you behave this way, period, paragraph. I'd be like, I don't know, man. I've always had a job. I own a home. I got a couple of cars. I go out and with women. Like, I could come with all of these things to say why I'm fine. But where I start to get hooked is where they say, and where I was educated that it's in my, guys, I'm not a doctor, right? So I'm just going to use words. It's in my genes. It's in my body. It's in my DNA. It's in my cells. I am different. If you're a real alcoholic like me, you agree with this. I have an abnormal reaction to alcohol. You know who has a normal reaction to alcohol? My sister. Same parents. Guess what happens when she has a glass of wine? She enjoys it. Guess what happens when she has a second one? She enjoys it. Guess what happens when she has a third? I don't know. I don't think I've ever seen her have 3 glasses of wine. I am her brother by blood. I don't have the same experience. Yes, I have a compulsion that leads me back to the drink when I know better. But now I also understand that I didn't make just a bad decision every time when I started. I started and I couldn't stop. Yeah, we'll do a little bit more here.
Yes, please.
The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. This is what David and I are going on and on about here, guys. This interests us, an allergy to alcohol, abnormal reaction. As laymen, unless somebody here's a doctor, we're all laymen, our opinion as to its soundness may, of course, mean little. But as ex-problem drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. I'm sure, Sam, you got a couple words. You want to give us those?
I do only have allergy, but if you want me to do more, I can look up more.
You should get layman also, please.
Okay. Let's do that when I have it.
Okay. So I'm just going to, so Sam will double back because I'll butcher some of these words, but I want to translate this a little bit into some simple language, right? The doctor's theory that we have an allergy, an abnormal reaction to alcohol interests us. So we're like, okay, tell me more. What, this is something physical? As laymen, and it's basically saying not as doctors, not as learned people in this area, our opinion as to this theory, right? Its soundness, so the soundness of the theory may of course mean little. So what that means is, because we're not doctors, our thoughts or opinion on whether this doctor's position is right or wrong doesn't matter. It's still interesting to us, right? But as ex-problem drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. You know what it explains for which we could not otherwise account? We say this repeatedly. What it accounts for is that I couldn't figure out is why I promised my girlfriend I was going to have 2 drinks and I was going to be home by 8 o'clock to have dinner and watch a movie. And I didn't have 2 drinks. I had 22 and I didn't make it home until 2 in the morning. A lot of 2s here, right? Where I stumbled there in a blackout state. I can't account for that. But this theory from the doctor can account for this. This is why it interests us. Go ahead, Sam.
I have layman, and it says a person not belonging to some particular profession. And then I also have allergy, which is abnormally high sensitivity to certain substances. So the doctor's theory that as we have an abnormally high sensitivity to certain substances or to alcohol interests us. As people not belonging to a profession, our opinion as to its soundness may of course mean little.
I got one more thing here. I'm going to share this. So our dear friend Ashton is with us tonight, who is a ICU nurse, right? Ashton, right? Okay, medical field. She chatted me to say, I looked up the medical definition of alcoholism that is still used today in the medical field, which is a medical condition characterized by an impaired ability to stop or control alcohol use despite adverse social, occupational, or health consequences. A person may also need more and more alcohol to feel drunk, and stopping suddenly may cause withdrawal symptoms. Said another way, in the face of consequences, I pick up again when I shouldn't, and I drink more than I should because I can't control it. Thank you for that, Ashton.
Yeah, so we're at the top of the hour, so I'll be brief. So the doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. You know, I'm not going to go be redundant what David just repeat the same thing. But how many times have you gone to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous or Cocaine Anonymous or Drugs DA, and you heard the guy come into the room or the gal come in the room and says, I was craving alcohol all morning today. Well, not if you weren't drinking, you weren't, because you don't break out into craving unless I take a drink. This is why it's so important. And I'm only going to say it like this. We always hear that the 164 pages, right? but also the 10 pages in the front of the book too is so vital. I got to understand what happens to my body, mainly is what he's going to talk about here. And until I understood this, and they talk about that in the sentence, but as ex-problem drinkers, we can say his explanation makes good sense, right, doctor? But explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account, which goes to David's point. This explains to me why I made those solemn vows, even to myself and even to the judge, that I was never going to do this again. But the obsession kicked in without my consent, without my permission. And then that thought was no longer an obsession. It was no longer a thought. It was an obsession. I picked up the drink and I broke out in craving. This allergy that only happens in the real alcoholic, never happens in the ordinary drinker, average drinker.
We're going to pause there, guys. We're just after the top of the hour, and it's a perfect place to pause. I don't know if we have any questions. You want to put them in the